And the thing is we haven't got enough vaccine to do vaccines for the people that are already approved. We have a lot of more demand than we have vaccine. And a little concerned that the state's asking us to do this attestation, essentially saying that we've done everything we can to get everyone the vaccine for the prior levels. And it's just not, I don't think, true. I mean, even in other counties where they're doing the attestations, I can't imagine they've received enough vaccine to back. It's just a matter of a turnover, really, just because it's going to take some time for people to know that these places have more vaccine and that they can go get vaccinated. And people that weren't doing vaccines before are now doing vaccines. So there's going to be a little bit of a gap between getting the extra vaccines and getting in people's arms. I don't think it's anything significant, but I just want you to know that we're not sitting on them. It's just a matter of getting them out and people knowing that they can get them at different places now. One thing that slowed down a little bit of the distribution is, initially Asante was doing pretty much all Pfizer vaccine. They have got into doing Pfizer and Moderna, and they're essentially changing it out during the day. And that changeover takes a little extra time. It cuts some availability for appointments out because Pfizer. If you hear a lot of people complaining about we're not opening it up to everyone, remember we're just a few short weeks away from everybody getting access, and at the same time we're having all of this vaccine lumped on us.
My view is that we've just got so many multiple sources of information and multiple distribution channels now that is causing confusion for people who want to know. They find themselves having to call around to all kinds of different places and finding out that there's different rules for all those different places. And again, it's just that's all I'm saying. It was set up by the state. We're doing the best we can.
It's our issue only in that we are the ones that can make this attestation and move to the next level. That's where it becomes our issue, and that's where I think again that analysis.
Danny, I think one of your previous comments about the inefficiency of this is really what concerns me. And all, but again, that's not. We're doing the best we can with the system that the state and the federal government set up. And so I'm not being critical. I'm just pointing out what I've heard from constituents about, hey,
apparently preliminary approval for the process from the White House to have. I think last time I told you it was a level 2 vaccination clinic from FEMA, and I was wrong. I have the doses right, but it's a level 3. A level 1 is 5,000 a day. That's what Portland is. A level 2 is what Salem is. It's 3,000 a day. And a level 3, which is what we're going to have, is 1,000 a day. So I didn't have the numbers right.
Anything from the commissioners?
Yeah.
I have a couple things. I did file for the records request with both the Secretary of State's office and OHA, and got confirmation they received it, but I haven't received any information yet. And I'll let you know as soon as I do. I'll just forward it, just an FYI, and then we can talk about it next week if it comes. And also, I have a question probably for Joel. I don't know. When I look at the recent Wisconsin decision with their state Supreme Court, I know they're not controlling the state of Oregon, but does that case precedence have any hope for any other state in that decision? Or if you look at it, I guess I would be interested in your input on it.
I actually have, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court made its decision based solely on the Wisconsin statutes relating to the governor's authority in an emergency. And in that case, I don't know specifics, but based upon the decision, it appears the way that the Wisconsin statute is worded is that the governor can only declare a state of emergency for a limited amount of time, which is different than Oregon. And what the governor in Wisconsin had done was the time period had run, and then he had then declared a successive state of emergency for the mask mandates. And what the Wisconsin Supreme Court decided is under their case, under their statutory law, he can't sort of get around that time limit by calling a subsequent state of emergency for the exact same issue. And so I think that's different than I think that Oregon's, because we don't have under our 401 emergency authority for the governor to declare emergency a built-in time limit. And so it's sort of a different issue of, in my opinion, where the Wisconsin governor tried to get around a statutory time limit that we don't have by trying to declare a second emergency. So in the Wisconsin court, was pretty clear that this wasn't based upon, this was based solely upon their reading of the statutory authority for the governor to work on an emergency and order something under their statute. So I think it would be not very useful when it came to looking at Oregon law. We used to have different statutory authorities.
Right. All right. Well, I just was curious. I was real surprised at the decision. Kind of the first movement, for opening against a governor's continual, emergency power. But I thought it was pretty interesting.
The Wisconsin courts have actually overturned a couple of things Wisconsin has done over the past year. At one point, I believe their equivalent of their director of OHA had declared an emergency, and the court had found that particular government official didn't have the authority; it had to be the governor. Wisconsin has, the courts have consistently, or I should say consistently, but numerous times taken a look at what the executive branch has done and found that it fell outside the statutory authority. That seems to be an issue, and it seems to be, at least in Wisconsin, the governor or state officials taking action and then other groups challenging them. So it just, we haven't seen it. And most of the challenges there are coming from the legislature, who is saying that this is beyond the authority that you have. And so we don't, that's again a different dynamic than what we have here in Oregon.
Right.
Yeah, our legislature delegated some very broad authority, and that is what needs to be amended, changed. And again, we already talked about this. There should have been, still should be, a joint resolution passed to take that authority back, but doesn't seem to be the appetite or the will. I have just a little bit. I did meet with Leah, the governor's one of her top aides. Obviously, we know Leah, and it was a pretty good meeting. You know, I always come out of these feeling better than it seems like what eventually ends up happening. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but there was at least seemed like a sincere request for what are your recommendations? How would you recommend these restrictions are reduced and burdens reduced, and how should things be determined? And you know, I've been saying all along, and I think it's very, and again, much more scientifically data-based and evidence-based than what they're using, is if we take the fact that we have a population that may have been responsible, these are just off the top of my head, I'm not saying these are the actual percentages, but a population that was responsible for 80%, let's say, of severe illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths. So maybe that's the 65 and over, maybe that's even just the congregate care, the assisted living facilities, all of those that we've talked about. If we take that population that may have been responsible for 80% of those adverse outcomes, and we've inoculated 60% of them, that to me means very clearly that we have mitigated about 48%, take the 60 times 80, 48% of our actual risk. The burdens should be reduced by that same amount, or about half. So if you look at it, that to me, you either take half of those, that if, for instance, you know, we had 73 cases yesterday. We are now right on the level. We're almost, I think we're about 194 cases per 100,000. If we go into the extreme level and the state tries to shut down businesses again, I don't even want to speculate on the reaction. I think we know that. We've seen it. We feel it. We know it. We feel it. And I told her that too, that this needs to be something that is not just, you know, asking opinions and asking for recommendations, but it needs to be implemented soon. And I made that case pretty clearly. And I'm going to follow it up with an email, again, reiterating exactly how I, again, would arrive at the calculus that determined how you reduce the burden. And hopefully it's something that will be heeded. It's all just, oh my gosh, what if this happens? What if this happens? We could do that forever. We could sit here and talk about what could happen, and boy, you know, if this happens, we're in trouble. Instead of looking at the evidence, looking at the numbers, looking at the data that we have, and make policy determined on what we know versus what we're dreading may happen. And I think that our state has made decisions based on worst case scenario on future, again, speculation, and it's just not the way to make policy, because what we know will happen is you will damage people's lives. You will hurt people. You will destroy businesses. You will destroy economies, and you'll destroy a lot of the future public health outcomes. We know that when people experience financial loss, it also equates to future adverse health consequences. So all of those things I tried to make very, very clear, and they need to be responsive to what we have been talking about, and to do something soon, because we're on the level. Josephine County right now is over the extreme level. All of those restaurants, the gyms will be, you know, back to hardly any capacity available. It is going to destroy businesses in our region. And again, if we have a couple bad days, same thing could happen to us. And not only will it destroy businesses, it will destroy public morale, psych, whatever. It will be a disaster in a lot of ways. And I really hope they realize that. I also said, you know, there are states, Texas, Florida, others, that have made all of this voluntary. And I think voluntary compliance, I said that when you trust that people can be responsible with their own public health, they're probably more likely to respond in a positive way to that. And it's showing, you know, Texas has had some of the lowest COVID rates they've had over the last 3 weeks since they've opened up. Florida has been extremely one of the lower states as far as the population. So again, all the evidence is pointing towards what we've been saying all along, and that is it's time, way past time, to open things up. I think and there was only a few other commissioners there. Commissioner DeYoung from Josephine, Commissioner Boyce from Curry County, and wasn't many others there. Those are the ones that really spoke. And anyway, we'll see what comes of that. I also made my pitch that on it. What I have right now is we are at 192 approximately per 100,000. We have 3 days left in this reporting period. I think we need to be under about 104 to 105 cases total in the next 3 days to stay in the high range. So keeping our fingers crossed there too.
Yeah, and so it's so amazing to me that we see there's such wide swings in the numbers. Someday I'd like to. It would be interesting when we finally start doing some analysis here. It'd be kind of interesting to see what it'd be interesting to see what's causing that. You know, and maybe there is a cause. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, great.
Well, here's what's interesting, and this is another thing that I meant.
Exactly the message I think needed to be conveyed to the governor's office that you gave her. You know.
Well, and she also asked, well, should this be a regional or a statewide or a countywide? And I said, I think you can make it a hybrid because right now the system is kind of punitive to counties with lower population. The lower, very, very small counties, of course, they don't go by a number per 100,000. They go by a raw number. We know that. But in counties like ours, where we go based on a cases per 100,000 population basis, any small or reasonably small, say, workplace outbreak that maybe has 20 cases or even 10 cases skews our numbers so much more than it does in the larger counties, because obviously you're talking about a smaller population that number will be applied to. And I said it's kind of bearing out in these smaller counties that are determine the risk level by population or by cases per 100,000 are all the ones that are seeing the higher levels. I think that is indicative of the fact that it's not applied equally, that they're not giving the same results of actual risk of community spread. So the 73 we saw yesterday, I don't know what went into that number. It could have been some sort of a workplace outbreak, but it doesn't take a lot to skew our numbers. So hopefully, though, we'll hear something soon. I again, holding my breath, I would have died a long time ago, so I'm not going to do that.
One of the other things is the cutoff for reporting day by day. So, if you look at the previous day, it was a pretty low number. If I remember, like it was down around like 10, I think. So it could be, half of those cases that got reported on that 75 day didn't get reported until the cutoff the prior day. So,
yeah, you've said that before, Danny, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, I understand statistically, but when you start to trying to do statistical analysis, when you see your statistic jumping around that much, it makes you ask the question, okay, so what is it? And you're right, Danny. It may entirely be just a matter of reporting, and that's fine. I just find it interesting.
I tend to think probably about half of. I mean, just based on prior, expectations and experience, probably about half of that increase is that probably we got some more additional positive cases. The biggest thing though is that we don't have a whole lot more hospitalizations. We didn't get 75 cases with 10 hospitalizations. We got 75 cases. So,
and hospitalizations went down.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's the same point Commissioner Dyer's making, but it's probably more succinct. It's just, I think they should just look at hospitalizations. If we got a whole bunch of people going to the hospital and dying versus people are testing positive, to me, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different world.
Well, and I wasn't going to say this, but I mean, one of the other things that I've been tracking is, and Rick, you say it very, very well. Just go onto the county website and look at the cases and look at the age spread of those cases. And what you'll see is the highest group that actually has cases is in the 20 to 29. And yet when you go to the tab that tells you what the deaths are, I mean, it's dramatic. I mean, it's almost exclusive, not exclusively, but 80% over into the upper reach, into the older and the older. Well, that's pretty logical pattern analysis and everything like that. And yet it appears that the state policies are not based upon that differential. But again, you can make that argument, and I get it. But I just would hope that someday we would look back at this and go, okay, what kind of data did we really use, and what kind of data did we really use that made a difference in terms of policy making? So I think, Rick, you're asking the right questions, and I sure wish they'd come back and give you an answer. But again, don't hold your breath.
No, but I get, and I don't know if it was sincere. It seemed very sincere that they are really looking to do something that is more responsive and more accurately representative of the risk that we're trying to mitigate. So let's hope.
Yeah.
And I think that level, the positivity in the PCR test tells a huge story that they're not telling. How many are in a range above 34 that is unreliable according to the federal HHS, and how many is, I mean, if you're under 20, you're probably very positive and contagious. But I think that is important information, and I don't know that we'll get it, but that's what I'm seeking for as well. How many of our cases were, 39, 40, and they aren't going to the hospital. They're just a positive.
Well, that's the other thing with it. Obviously, if they do have a positive PCR test and they're really not very sick, they're not going to go to the hospital. So that hospital data will bear out the fact that even though we may have higher case numbers, again, the risk for serious outcomes, severe outcomes is not high. And that is what we were shutting supposedly businesses down for. That should be the basis that we also determine what our policy going forward is. And I think at least, again, they're listening. Before it used to be a shut you down. No, this is the science. This is what we're following. I didn't hear that. Hopefully that really means that there is an attitude change. We'll see.
We haven't gotten a response to our last two letters in our public hearing, though, as far as I know.
No.
Here's our responsiveness.
And I should have asked about that as well, being responsive to other types of communication. I think I sent an email expressing that, these meetings every 2 weeks, while they can be productive and they can be useful, there are other means of communication that need to be open and utilized for getting responses and getting answers for our constituents in a timely manner.